Hey everybody, Keith Tanner here from Flyin Miata, and I'm here to talk to you today about Voodoo Boxes. I'm sorry, this is not a very exciting thing to look at today. I wish I had all sorts of great visual aids, but this is a little black box that does cool things, but it's still just a little black box fundamentally. So, the Voodoo Box is a fundamental part of our emissions legal turbo systems. It's what allows us to take advantage of factory calibrations and get through the emissions testing procedure without problems. It's a very simple little device, honestly, in terms of what it does. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the theory of how it works and explain what it works and what it does and why it works and its limitations and why you want it or why you don't want it, and etc. I'll do my best to answer your questions as we go. If you have any, please throw them in the comments. I will try to address any questions as we go along. So first off, what the Voodoo Box is, it's basically an auxiliary fuel controller. The reason we use it instead of a full ECU is because OE engineers, the guys at Mazda and every other automotive manufacturer, spend hundreds of thousands of person hours, in testing and calibration and setting up the ECU programming that's in your car. We have some friends who work in calibration for companies like Mazda or companies like GM, and the sheer number of people involved and the sheer amount of effort involved in tuning an engine that's used even in another application in a slightly different car is unbelievable. So we don't want to take all of that effort, all of that fine tuning, and just throw it away, because anybody who's put a programmable ECU in their car knows that making peak power is the easy part. That's like 3 different factors. It's timing, it's fuel, it's whatever. Making it start when it's cold, making sure it doesn't die when it's running hot and coming up to a stoplight, making sure it has proper AC compensation, making sure nothing stumbles when the fans come on. All the weird little corners of the map are much harder to do, but they're also ones that have a big effect on emissions. So what we're doing with the Voodoo Box, the reason we're doing this is because the Voodoo Box allows us to retain all of that hard-earned factory calibration when the car's not in boost. Yeah, get a good close-up. Look at this. There's the bottom side. Ooh, yeah. It allows us to maintain all of that complicated, that very fine-tuned emissions calibrations. And then when we're under boost, when we're in a situation that the factory engineers never saw coming, the car is healthy and happy. So I'm going to explain a little bit of the theory of what's going on. Now I will bring out the visual aids. Look at that, eh? As you can tell, I'm a frustrated artist. This is basically, when you're driving along, the stock ECU is delivering pulses of fuel for the injectors. This is the life of an injector. It's closed, it's open. It's closed, it's open. It's closed, it's open. And how long it's open determines how much fuel you get. This seems pretty straightforward. It's like holding your end to the end of a hose and just opening and closing it. And this is all under the control of the ECU. When we're under boost, we need more fuel than the stock ECU thinks should be there. So what the Voodoo Box is doing is it says, okay, we're in positive manifold pressure. We've got 3 pounds of boost in the intake manifold. And it basically just keeps that injector open a little bit longer. It just extends this. The stock ECU thinks it's only going this far, and it tries to turn off the injector there. The Voodoo Box keeps it open a little bit longer. And does it on the next one, and does it on the next one, and that's where your extra fuel comes from, is the Voodoo Box keeping that injector open a little bit longer. When you're not in boost, the Voodoo Box is sleeping, and everything's exactly as the stock ECU is expected to be. Now you can see where the limitation comes from. Eventually, the Voodoo Box will try to keep the injector open to the point where it has to open up again. And at that point, the injector is what you call static. The injector is basically, it's stuck wide open, it's spraying as much fuel as it possibly can, and that's your power limitation. That is the absolute maximum amount of fuel you can deliver, is the injector being open all the time. So this is our limitation, is right where this happens. Now that is a function both of engine speed and of the amount of fuel you need, say boost. Because as you can imagine, if the engine's spinning faster, these pulses have to be closer together because the engine's spinning faster. I think I just said that. So the limitation where you run into the backside of the next pulse comes earlier. So the point is, if you keep your revs down, you can actually add more fuel per cylinder event. It's when you go high RPM. That looks like a very clear diagram, but hopefully you understand what's going on there. That's our limitation. So that's what the power limitation of the Voodoo Box is. Basically, the limitation is basically the ultimate capacity of the stock injectors. And the reason we still use the stock injectors is because the Voodoo Box, we'll go back to our original drawing here. There we go. The Voodoo Box can't shorten this pulse. So if you take an injector and put a bigger one in, the stock ECU will keep it open for a certain amount of time, expecting a certain amount of fuel. If you put a much bigger injector in there, you get a whole bunch more fuel. The thing runs rich. All sorts of error lights pop up. ECU doesn't like it. So if you're going to run bigger injectors, you have to shorten this pulse, but the Voodoo Box cannot do that. It cannot override, cannot close an injector early. It can only keep it open longer. Just the nature of how injectors are controlled. So our ultimate power limitation on a Voodoo Box is what the stock injectors can handle. On a 1.6 Miata, that is about 160 horsepower at the wheels, I think. On the 2001 to 05 cars, it's about 200 at the wheels, and then it varies, as the years go on. And you'll notice that those are about the power quotes for our Stage 1 turbo systems, because that's the limitation of power on our Stage 1 turbo systems, is we simply cannot deliver any more fuel, and so we can't run any more boost. The amount of boost we can run is basically related to how much fuel we can deliver. So that is the power limitation. It's unfortunate. It'd be great if this was a solution for making 250 horsepower on a stock 1.6. That's just not going to happen. If you want to push further than what those stock injectors can handle, we recommend a full replacement ECU for two reasons. One is because it allows you to put in bigger injectors and run them at shorter pulse intervals or shorter times. But it also means you can add more safeguards. A 1.6 ECU and even the early 1.8s don't have knock sensors, for example. So if you are pushing the limits, you're pushing a little too far, and the car starts knocking, it doesn't know, it won't do anything about it. So that's why if you're really pushing things, you're getting rid of all of your margins of error. We strongly recommend that you do run an aftermarket ECU. The problem is you won't be able to keep all of that factory emissions tuning. You won't be able to have emissions legality through most of the US. Well, federally, actually, you won't really have it at all, but your local emissions testers may or may not be okay with it. And you're responsible for everything it does. Those are the downsides, but that's what you have to do if you want to push the power further. We concentrate on emissions legal power, so that's why we use the Voodoo Box and we stick with the limitations imposed. So the Voodoo Box doesn't just extend the fuel pulses though. What it also does, it has something in it called an O2 Signal Modifier. And this combination is something I don't think anybody else does. There are other boxes, kind of like the Voodoo Box out there, that will extend the on time of the injectors. But what we're doing is right now. Your stock ECU works in two basic modes. Sort of aftermarket ECUs. They run an open loop or closed loop. Open loop means it basically just says, okay, I've got so much air in the intake manifold, I've got so much RPM, so much throttle, so here's how much fuel I'll give it, and it just sends it out the door and doesn't pay any attention to what's going on. Closed loop means it says, okay, there's my fuel amount, and then it checks the air-fuel ratio with the O2 sensor. And it says, oh, that's running a little too rich, next time a little bit less fuel. Maybe next time a little bit more fuel. And that's why having a good O2 sensor is important, because if your O2 sensor fails, your ECU will compensate by throwing in a bunch of fuel, your car will run rich, you'll stink, might kill your cat, all sorts of bad things if you don't have a working O2 sensor, because that's an important sensor for the ECU, so it can basically check its work. And the cars flip it back and forth between open loop and closed loop in different situations. But usually full throttle, high load situations tend to be open loop because stuff's happening too fast for the ECU to react. The newer the ECU, the faster it can react, the more time it spends in closed loop. But the problem is, when you're dealing with boost, is that there's a moment where you're running in closed loop and you need a bunch more fuel because all of a sudden you've just gone to 6 pounds of boost and the car is still running in closed loop and it's trying to run an air-fuel ratio, say of 14.7, something that's clean and efficient, and you want it to run something more like 11 to 1 or 12 to 1 so that it's got the fuel it needs so it doesn't detonate and it basically makes the horsepower, and there'll be a dip. What'll happen is the stock ECU, let's try and see if I can sketch this out. We have a fuel delivery coming along like this, and all of a sudden right here, boost. So your fuel needs go up here. And that's what the Voodoo Box will try to do. But the problem is the ECU sees that and it says no, and it pulls the fuel back out again. And the Voodoo Box and the ECU are fighting. The Voodoo Box is only adding a certain amount to the injector on time. It's not controlling everything. It's completely open loop. And eventually you'll go into open loop and the Voodoo Box takes over. And this is what we call a lean tip-in right there, this dip. And that comes from the stock ECU realizing what the Voodoo Box is doing and trying to override it. So what we do is we take the O2 signal, and right at this point when we go into boost, we modify it. We tell the ECU, hey, you know what? Everything's cool. You're not seeing all sorts of extra fuel you're not expecting. In fact, everything's a little bit lean, so give me a hand here. And the stock ECU will help and fill in that lean tip-in. So it helps with drivability quite a bit. Also gets rid of a potential for a knock event right there. And so it's a very similar thing to what's going on the fuel. An O2 signal kind of looks like this on a narrow band. It cycles back and forth, and the 14.7 is in the middle. All it really tells you is I'm rich, I'm lean, I'm rich, I'm lean, I'm rich, I'm lean. And what we're doing is we're, at this point, when we're trying to modify the signal, is we just take it and we just pin it down at lean. And so the stock ECU will basically try to add fuel and get back up there until it goes into open loop and it ignores what's going on. And that's, again, just looking to fill this in. Do we have any questions that have come up so far, Travis?
No questions so far.
There have been no draft. I have explained everything perfectly, he says. So, well, one of the questions we do get quite a bit is, can I use this on, say, a Mazda Speed? And the answer is no, you can't actually, because a Mazda Speed already uses the stock injectors to the full capacity. If you take a Mazda Speed and you put on, say, our little enchilada, our intake kit, and a good downpipe, and a good intercooler, you will find that, and you turn the boost up, you will find that it will keep adding fuel until it goes static, until it gets about 200 horsepower. The stock ECU basically has the turbocharger capability built into it, which is not surprising given that it came from the factory with one. So unfortunately, these are no good to Mazda Speed owners. I know that Mazda Speeds have some weird drivability quirks built into their ECU that are emissions related, and we do actually use the Signal Modifier part of the Voodoo Box to help get rid of some of that. But unfortunately, overall, this is not really a tool for a Mazda Speed. Do we have a question, Travis?
We have one question. Could you adjust the timing changes associated with the Voodoo Box and the kit?
Okay, timing is effectively a different aspect. The Voodoo Box only concerns itself with fuel. Timing is addressed in different ways depending on the year of the Miata. On the NAs, you can adjust the base timing using the cam angle sensor. On the NBs, you can adjust the base timing using the trigger wheel, but you do need to retard your timing. The amount you have to retard it depends on your ultimate boost pressure, how much back pressure you have going on, say if you're running a 3-inch or 2.5-inch downpipe, and it depends on the quality of fuel you get. People in California get terrible fuel. People in New York State get awesome fuel. People in Texas get it fresh out of the ground, straight from the dinosaur. So depending on where you live in the States, there's different fuel everywhere, and so everyone has a different amount of time that they can run. We actually are working on bringing a timing box to market. The plans are that it will work on all the NAs and NBs and will allow you to run more base timing, which means faster response, faster spool, but still be safe timing under boost. That is something that is under development right now. We are working on making sure our EO is updated so that we can include it legally with our turbo kits, and it will be coming down the line. I don't have any other information other than that, and Brandon over in engineering is probably going to hunt me down and kick my butt because I let everyone know about that, but timing solutions on the way. This is not one of them. So I'm going to try to see if I can do a little demo here. I'm going to see if I can demonstrate the O2 Signal Modifier. Well, so much for show and tell. It was worth a try.
The joys of live television.
The joys of live television. That's how you know this wasn't pre-recorded, folks. So what you would have seen is you would have seen that gauge swinging back and forth as it dithered, basically, as it idled and adjusted the air fuel to make sure the idle was just right. And then when I triggered the Voodoo Box, you would have seen it, or the Signal Modifier specifically, you would have seen it pinned down to about what we saw it actually, about 0.1 volts. Basically low enough that the car thinks that it's running lean, and therefore it starts adding fuel in response. Do we have a question there, Travis?
We've got one. Andre is asking what ECU you would recommend for a 1.6 VVT NA swap.
1.6
That's very
VVT NA swap.
specific.
You know, yeah, I wonder what Andre has planned. My recommendation with ECUs is that unless you have a lot of experience with it, with tuning ECUs in general, the most important thing is your support. It's who is there to help you, because it's a big learning curve. Like I said, that you can start with a decent base map. You can get pretty close on the big picture stuff. The a bit of work. You can get the idle working. You can get the top, the dyno stuff, the peak power done very easily. But all those little awkward things that make it not start well in cold weather. Cold start's really hard to get right because you really only get 1 or 2 shots at it a day. You want to have somebody on your side to help with that. I'm a big fan of professional tuners because I think that one person who has seen 1,000 different cars is better than 1,000 people who've only seen one car. Forums are great for a lot of support, but I think you get better quality information from someone who's a pro. So that's the long way around of saying that basically, if there's someone locally who's very good at a specific ECU and very comfortable with it, that is probably a good choice. The guys in the UK love the ME221, for example. They have a lot of local support. There's a lot of local knowledge from the tuners, so it's very popular over there. In the US, naturally, Megasquirt, big. It's the biggest ECU in the market. The various Megasquirts. I would recommend getting one of the more high-powered one. Get the 3, for example. Don't go with the bargain basement ones that may not have the abilities you need. You want lots of IOs, especially with VVT. You want the ability to control that. But most importantly, you want to make sure that someone's there to help you out if you have trouble. So it kind of sounds like I'm dodging the question, and I'm sure everyone wants me to come in and say, this is my favorite ECU ever. But well, it's not in here. Right now there's a car parked outside that has a Link ECU in it. And you know what? It runs well because the guy who wrote the instruction manual tuned it. So there you go. I'm going to close the door again. There we go. I think I have addressed all the questions. If you have a question, please throw it in the comments right away. The Voodoo Box, as I said, it's an important part of our emissions legal strategy. Oh, superchargers. I should talk about superchargers. Superchargers have a problem, especially on VVT engines. And that is this boost rise can be very quick. That's why you put a supercharger on, right? Because of this turbo lag is the devil. The problem is this ability to do a super fast spike can get ahead of everything else that's going on. As you can tell from this very clear diagram, you may remember from earlier. And it will exacerbate any lean tip in, which can lead to the car momentarily falling on its face, which means basically you're not getting that instant response that you bought the supercharger for in the first place. I'm talking specifically about positive displacement superchargers here, roots, twin screws. So we don't recommend, especially on the high compression VVT cars, we don't recommend that you run a Voodoo Box with a supercharger. It's not our ideal setup. Those, if you want it done right, you really have to go with an aftermarket ECU, a full ECU, or you will have problems with idle droop, or not idle droop, with lean tip in. I should also mention that older versions of the Voodoo Box could be tuned. You could open them up, there are a couple little potentiometers in there, and you could tune both the onset, which is the boost point, or the manifold pressure at which it would start adding fuel, the slope, which was the amount of extra fuel it would add for every pound of boost, for example, and the onset for the O2 signal modifier. We no longer offer a user adjustable one, and that is part of our emissions legality. We cannot offer control components like this that can be modified by the user and still have a car that is guaranteed to run clean. So they are no longer adjustable. You can open those up and look at it, but there's nothing you can do inside there. So all you're going to see is a couple little blinky lights that tell you everything's hooked up. If you do find one of the old Voodoo Boxes, if you have your hands on one of those can be tuned for different size turbochargers for a little more unusual stuff. But these ones are fixed. One thing about piggybacks in general is that they paint in broad strokes. They're not a fine instrument the way a perfectly tuned ECU on an 800 horsepower turbo engine that's this close to the edge of destruction needs to be. The air-fuel ratio will fluctuate a little bit. It depends on what the stock ECU feels like doing. We're taking advantage of the fact that there's a big margin for error. So everything is safe. I don't know of an engine failure that has happened with a Voodoo car. And we've been using these things for at least 12 years, I think. So they're very safe for the engine as long as you stay within their operating abilities. Travis, do we have a question?
Someone was asking about pre-wired harness extensions.
Yes,
for the Voodoo Box.
We have looked into that, just a plug and play option, because this is scary. There's like 7 wires on this thing. Is 7? Yeah. We have looked into that in the past. They are a little more expensive than you might think, and this is a product. The cost is a factor. We will continue to look at it if we can find a good option that is a plug-in for every model of Miata, because of course there's going to be at least 5 or 6 different harnesses for that. You've got 1.6, you've got 93 California 1.6, which has its own special stuff. You've got early 1.8, you've got mid 1.8, you've got early NA, you've got late NA, you've got Mazda speed. So that is something we've looked at. It's 7 wires. You only have to deal with it once. They're all going into basically the same place. So yeah, it's a little bit awkward, but will it be worth the expense is a question that we may have to let the market answer. Travis, we have a question.
Someone wants to know if jumping to a bigger 70mm throttle body will help the supercharger problem.
I think it would make it worse.
Because you're adding more air.
Yeah, bigger throttle body to solve the supercharger problem. The problem is there you get an even bigger slug of air, that big initial hit when you crack the throttle open. And that's what happens is that air's there, but the fuel's not there yet, and that's when you go lean, and that's when the thing goes and stumbles a little bit. It's just part of the drivability of superchargers with piggyback ECUs or piggyback controllers. Unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing to get around. You have to anticipate that air coming because it shows up so quickly. And turbochargers, even on a small turbo, I've run a Voodoo Box with a 2554 on my own personal car for a while, and with a small turbo, it's just got it. Basically, the response time of the turbo and the response time of the Voodoo Box are very well matched. They both come online at about the same time. It's not a long lag. This thing thinks pretty quick, as you can imagine. But there's just that 1 or 2 cylinder events that they come in lean and make the car stumble a little bit. Hopefully, I have answered all the questions. These are available from Flyin Miata, of course, exclusively. This is a product that was developed specifically for us and has been made for us for, like I said, for years. It's been through several different evolutions. It used to have a really cool little skull on here, which I designed years ago, which unfortunately we have lost. I hadn't realized that we might have to put the skull back on. It was fun. If you have any questions after this, please do put them in the comments. We will respond to them in the comments either on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever future media platform you're watching this in the future. Or you can contact us, obviously our customer support department, and we will do our best to help you out with this. That's about all I've got to say. Thank you for your attention, folks. This is Keith Tanner from Flyin Miata, and I hope you're having a good day.